So, welcome. This is going to be the bike check video. We're going to look at how we're gonna check a bike before buying it, just to make sure that everything works alright and that we're not buying something that we won't feel comfortable with at the end. So, I'm just going to use this bike as an example bike. May not be the best example there is, because it's I know it's working, so there's nothing going to be faulty at all. Also, it's quite a new bike, so it's kind of good to see what modern standards are, but it's not going to be the best at showing what retro bikes do have. So anyway, I'm just going to start. The first thing that I'm going to do is, after making sure that the frame's alright, this is pretty simple, there's no brakes, I'm just going to see if there's any cracks or anything, just very briefly. Check the spots where it's been welded maybe, because that's mostly where, if it's welded, where brakes are going to happen. If it's carbon, just make sure, well, you've just got to take a chance really, because it's hard to make out whether there's a break or a crack in a carbon frame, and if there is, it's quite lethal in many cases actually, because it kind of breaks unexpectedly. Next thing I want to make sure is the brakes work, obviously. So in continental European bikes, you've always got the front brake on the left. In the UK, it's the other way around. So you just hold it down and just slightly balance it forward. It should just fucking grab it, and like that, just be it. In this case, you'll also find out whether the fork and the stem are connected well. So if you do this and you kind of balance it backwards and forwards a little bit, and you feel that there's something there, it's kind of hitting, like the inner tube is hitting against the outer tube, you may have to readjust these screws here. So just open this a little bit. On the modern bikes, you open this a little bit, you tighten this a little bit, so just so that the stem kind of grabs the fork a little bit tighter, so that it won't move anymore, not as much. And then you close this afterwards again, obviously. Don't do these too tight, because I don't need much. And then you try it again, and either it's disappeared, or in the other case you might have a problem down here. The older bikes have a bit of a different system. So all you do with the older bikes is you've got two screws here. So you kind of you screw them down to fix the stem on the fork, and then with the second one you kind of just tighten the first one. So that's really what it does. So you just kind of do this movement here, and then it should be less, and if it's not, you might have a problem down here, which makes the whole thing a bit more complicated. As well, the brake, if it's not a disc brake like this one, which I wouldn't expect normally, you have a caliper brake here, so it just sits around here like this, and you've got the cable running through from one end, and then mostly where the cable is attached, you've got a small lever, that's got like a pointy edge, so you can open it, chuck, if it's putting upwards, it's open, or you can close it. So it just makes the calipers a little bit tighter if you close it, which is how you usually run. So that means that the brake can be used, and if you open it, it's usually to take the wheel out, because that can, like, the tire might be a bit too wide to take out when it's not open. So that's how you open it. Just a small lever here, check, make sure it's closed when you use it, and if it's not properly functioning, just check whether the lever is open or closed. Exactly, do the same on the back wheel. It's a lot. You might have to put a little bit of weight on the back wheel, just to make sure that it's not just like turning on the ground. But yeah, that's quite simple. There's no such thing as a fork end that you have to take care of here. Just make sure that that's working. Next thing is the wheels, because they can be quite faulty, and mostly people tend to realize that afterwards, and that's a bit annoying, because that can be really a pain in the ass. So what you check is, first thing, obviously, what I do is I hold it like this. So I hold it on the handlebar like this, just to have like a feel, and then I do this, and I feel in my hand whether there's any, like, if I feel any irregularities, any like any bits where it's turning a little bit harder, just to see whether there's something in here. I could also just take the whole thing out, the whole wheel out, and then hold the axle, turn it in my hand, and I'd feel it a lot more than, like, a lot more intensely. But mostly this is just fine. Feel it. I feel a regular kind of humming, and that's exactly how it's meant to be. And if there's any strong irregularities, there might be something wrong with the axle, and that mostly is you having to exchange it. But they're quite can be quite timely to fix and difficult as well. Next thing I want to know is whether the wheel is going in a straight circle. So if it's been hit, if the wheel's been hit by a particularly big stone, or the car is driven into it or something, the wheel will have a slight 8 to it. The way I check this is I lift it up again, I turn the wheel, and I just make sure that not the tire, but the wheel itself is going very, very regular. It hasn't got any bumps. So I can use a key or something. Don't touch it with a key because you're going to scratch it. But just to make sure that the distance between my finger, which is attached to the fork, so it's a fixed point, and the wheel isn't changing too much. It can change a little bit, just be a little bit wobbly, but shouldn't be too much. And especially if there's any big ones, you can expect that something has hit against it, and you can always try to fix it a little bit by turning the spokes. But if there's like a really big one, you won't be able to fix it. Do the same with the back wheel. Just the very same thing. Just see whether the distance between your finger or key or pen or whatever you're using and the wheel, the rim is staying the same. Yeah, that was that. Obviously, yeah, you can take the bike and obviously go for a little ride. What I do, if you've got suspension for it, is always make sure you kind of press it down just to see whether the suspension is working. This obviously hasn't got a suspension for most road bikes won't. No road bikes actually. Some very few gravel bikes do by now, but still very few. But mountain bikes will have a suspension fork. Just make sure you can push it down. If it's a lockable one, there will be a mostly blue small lever here. Sometimes it's on the handlebar. Mostly it's going to be here on the right top pole. Don't know of the suspension fork. Make sure you lock it once, see if it's actually locked, and then open it again, see if it's going in a little bit. It should be about a third of the length of the metallic pistons. So if you lean on it, it just should go in like about a third of the actual suspension travel, which is, let's say it's got 100mm suspension travel, 10 centimeters. The piston should go in running for about 3 centimeters. Yeah, that's it. Another thing, quite important, if it's a bit loose here, you can take the wheel and just try and turn it a bit sideways. So if you feel any chuck, you might have to turn these a bit closer, but it can also mean that the axle is fucked. Do the same at the back wheel. Just see if you can move it sideways a little bit, just to make sure that works. And I reckon that's time for you to get on the saddle, because that's when you're going to test the function of the gears, which you can do while riding easily. Then there's also about the gears, and many bikes that you're buying secondhand, they will come with gears that are not properly set, so you will have to reset them. It's not that difficult. It can be learned in like a couple of hours, I guess, and it's like if you've not got a lot of practice, it'll take you 20 minutes, half an hour maybe, but that's you set, so that's not really a setback in buying a bike, just because it's got gears that won't shift really, if it's just the settings. But you obviously, when you go on the bike, and you make sure to check every gear, see how it's going up and down, and like see whether that's working at all. And the brakes, obviously, make sure you brake properly, you hold the brake and you make sure the bike stops, and that's you kind of making sure that all works, and you're not buying something that isn't working the way you thought it was. Yeah, obviously you make sure that this is running freely as well. There's no particular cracks or anything. It's kind of crackling a little bit, doing some cracky noises, and just make sure it isn't, because yeah, that's also quite a complicated bit to exchange. You've always got plenty of standards for the button bracket. It has like so many different standards. You've got to measure it, and then measure the inner diameter, measure the width of it, and then you've got to see what pedals you've got, what crank you've got, what standard it fits, and they kind of started to they've kind of started to standardize it recently in the last couple of years, but the old ones are really just like, it's just like a matter of luck to me, really. I guess there is a standard, but I've not figured it out yet. Yeah, obviously you check all the screws, see if everything's kind of tightened, so you'd always take a Allen key with you, just a few Allen keys, just to make sure you can do basic fixes. I'd always recommend taking a small bike pump with you as well, because obviously if there's a flat tire or something and it's just needing pumped up, like that's you on the safe side when you've got one. And apart from that, I think that's really the major things, if I'm not getting anything wrong here. Obviously the chain might be fucked, the chain might be rusty or anything, but that's really minor things. A new chain that you get that for under 15 euros or something, so yeah, that'll be fine. As well as yeah, I reckon that's it. That's the main functions that a bicycle should fulfill, and if it doesn't, yeah, you just gotta really learn how complicated it is to fix every one of these things that might have been faulty here. Most of them you can fix, all of them, except for a broken frame. Maybe you could wheel that, but I'd kind of advise against you doing that yourself. See people going down on bikes doing that. Yeah, but I think that's really it. You kind of got to get a feeling for how much it costs to fix every single bit of it, but it'd be much nicer if you buy the bike and you know exactly what is wrong, so there isn't any big surprises at the very end when it comes to what you're paying to get that bike fixed. Yeah, I think that's really it. More minor things would be the brake pads. Check the brake pads if there's still lines on it. If you see lines, that means like small like cut marks or something. That means that there's still something to go. And apart from that, yeah, make sure the gears work, pedals work. Obviously, it kind of turns, but some things might be due to grease. Some minor rust on steel bikes is alright. If it's too much, you should be asking yourself whether you really want to pay all that money for getting a bike that's already quite rusty. It's always good to ask whether the bike has set outside or inside, because it does make quite a difference. If a bike was prone to rain and snow, especially ice, the salt they put on the roads, it fucking kills a bike. Like, it just, bam, it's a fucking piece of rust afterwards, like after being out one winter. Like, that's proper bad for bikes. Yeah, but I think that's alright. One thing you can try, but it's not too important, like if you've got a profiled tire with these stumps on it, kind of have a look for whether they're really, especially at the back wheel, because that's usually where people brake very hard and kind of slide over the ground, so they rip all the stumps off and kind of see whether there's still some to go. But I think, yeah, that's really it. So I think if you try and take care that all that has been checked, you kind of know what you're buying, I guess. So good luck.